weather's coming. Something's starting. It surely is. You can feel it. Yeah.
Just the other day, which is unfortunate that it didn't occur to me many, many years ago, that it's not me that needs to show what would Jesus do. It's the Christ in me that God is calling to do what he needs me to do, where he placed me this day to do. So today I am thankful that I don't have to do what Jesus could do because he's going to do it if I can get out of his way. So I don't have to fear things that are for the future. I don't have to worry about things that are concerning to me. I just to say, Lord, what will you do in this situation?
You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. In the midst of deep sorrow, I see your light is breaking through. The dark of night will not overtake me. I am pressing into you. Lord, you fight my every battle, and I will not fear. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. You amaze me, redeem me. You call me as your own. You amaze me, redeem me. You call me as your own. You amaze me, redeem me. You call me as your own. You amaze me, redeem me. You call me as your own. You're my strength, you're my defender. You're my refuge in the storm. Through these trials, you've always been faithful. You bring healing to my soul. And I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me.
Oh, Lord Jesus, we do thank you that we do not walk through this world alone, that you are our strength, our defender, our refuge in the storm, our faithful healer, and your light breaks through all darkness. Thank you for fighting our every battle. Thank you for being our great God. Amen. During this next song, we would invite the kids to head to Sunday school.
The splendor of a king, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide, and trembles at his voice.
cook and recook, so welcome back.
Welcome to a friendly morning. Got the leftover Bible cutouts from last week up here. We were in breaking the bread this morning, and Deborah, just before singing one of the hymns back there in the earlier service today, said, what in the world's going on in the world today? Funny you should mention that. That's what we're going to talk about today. Noah, interesting character. He lived in a pretty hostile environment, not too much unlike what we live in. A couple weeks ago, Paige and I were kind of going through some photography stuff, and she started talking about this history professor, right, that used this as an illustration in one of his slides. And I said, I need that slide because it'll be perfect for my opening message slide. Back in 1975, not 75, 1995, mid-90s, I'd just been laid off from work. And I figured what better thing to do after being laid off but go do sound system for a Billy Graham crusade in Newport. The funny thing about it is I thought I was supposed to be there even before I knew I was getting laid off. I really felt a strong draw to that, to help out there, and it was one of their, it wasn't Billy Graham, it was one of their preaching staff that was there. And so when I got fired, it's like, God, this is a really strange way to get me to go do sound, for the next 3 days. But I knew this is where you wanted me for some really strange reason. And I couldn't go because work was way too busy. We were in the middle of a big proposal that I was trying to write to go to the government. So I'm in there setting up, and all of a sudden, from the back of I was up in the front doing the wiring, and all of a sudden, Don Heyman, is that you? And I go, I know that voice, and that voice shouldn't be here. It's a guy, Dennis, I worked with probably 15 years ago, probably one of the crudest, most in-your-face, pain in the neck, tiring, obnoxious engineers you would ever want to meet. I go, Dennis, what in the world are you doing here? He goes, since we met, I got saved. I said, that is absolutely fantastic. He goes, why are you here? I said, I got laid off, so I figured I'd come help out. So he goes, funny thing, we're looking for a software development manager in our company over in North Kingston. So I said, that sounds perfect. I'll send you my resume. So I sent him the resume. He was like one of the, he wasn't a VP, but he was pretty high up in the company. It wasn't big. It was maybe 40, 45 people. And so the interview gets set up for a Friday. I go in around noon. I was there all afternoon. It was probably 1 o'clock. I was in there all afternoon. The last guy I talked to was the president of the company. Really great guy. Really enjoyed. We had a really good time. And at 4 o'clock, he goes, I don't want to break up the meeting, but I have to. I'm flying to Mexico to meet with the vice president because we're having a little difficulties. He really wanted the president's spot, so he's kind of upset about it. And we got some customers we want to meet, so I figured it'd be a good time to kind of, heal wounds and kind of embrace him back into the company and let him know he's really valuable, and on he went. So he goes, we'll set go talk to the reception, or the secretary there. This was before they called them admin assistants. I talked to the administrator over there and set a meeting up for like Tuesday, which I did. So I'm looking forward to this meeting again on Tuesday, and I get a call Monday night from my friend Dennis. He goes, Don, you can't come in Tuesday for the interview. Something really bad has happened. I can't even tell you about it because we still don't know what's going on. But when all this blows over and gets resolved, we'll definitely have you back in to talk. Oh, by the way, if you see something on the news, you'll know. I'm going, what in the world can this be? So Rita and I are watching the news Wednesday or Thursday night, and on the news is President of North Kingston Company murdered in Mexico. They found his body buried in a shallow grave in the sand by the side of the road, along with the gun not too far from there. The vice president went down with him purposefully to murder him because he didn't get his job. That is at our doorstep in more ways than we can imagine, and probably more ways than we even want to think about. This was not where I had originally intended going today, but God took whatever it was originally. I had this thing all done. You know, everything was done. I already taught this. And God ripped half of it out and put another half back in. And hopefully today we can get a picture of this that will change how we think, change how we believe, and change how we behave. Father, we come to you today because we need you. This world that we live in is definitely hostile. Some of us don't see it as much as others, but it's still there. And we need your help in understanding how we can live in that kind of environment in your truth, and in our own small way have an effect on the people around us. I don't belong up here, but God, you'll have to talk through me. Amen. Oh, too far. Noah is referenced in a number of different places, not a lot, but a few. This is probably one of the more recognizable passages. For as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the coming of the Son of the Man. That's a scary thought for today. For in those days, before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark, and when they were unaware, remember that term, until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. There was more going on than just eating and drinking in Noah's day. It is characterized by two attributes, neither one of which is good, but they run rampant today too. One is violence, and the other is corruption. And like it or not, we're stuck there. That's the world that we live in now. It was not the world that God intended, but it's where we are today. Mass shootings of 2018. This is a composite. I went and checked it on a couple different sites to make sure that we heard it on the news the other day when we were watching the news, and it was like 307 incidents in 2018. That's more than one a day. we're roughly 60 days away from the end of the new year, right? So it's a little bit more than one a day. I was like, ah. So I went out, I checked a couple different sites, and sure enough, all the numbers came in the same. That's our world. And that's just one. We'll hit some more later on as we go. The whole point being to drive home where we are and what we need to do and how we need to think. And more importantly, not only what we need to think, but what we need to believe. You move to something that's a little less physically violent. In the scientific and philosophical world, here's what's going on there. Richard Dawkins, probably one of the premier scientists of the world today, an avowed atheist. He describes his own politics as vaguely left. This means a concern for the state of the world and a desire ultimately to eradicate religion from society. Two goals. He's in a position monetarily, he's in a position scientifically, and he's in a position politically as well as socially to work that. The two strands of Darwin's mission, from another article, promote science, demolish religion. It's violence against not just our beliefs, but the belief of any religion in the world, right or wrong, right? It's an attack on our fundamental belief and right, in a sense, to believe, because society is moving that way to take those freedoms away from us. And so as we take a look at two things, hopefully we can maybe make some sense out of this and see what we can do to keep what we have in our faith on the right path, and see where we go wrong when we do go wrong, even as Christians. Genesis chapter 6. I do not have a lot of verses up on the screen. We're not necessarily going to read every verse, which is about 3 chapters worth. But I want us to take a look at the story of Noah. We're going to, there's a whole bunch of questions about the story of Noah that everybody likes to ask. How did he get all those animals in the ark? I think Matt's going to talk sometime later on Noah, so if you have any questions like that, you can just email Matt, and I'm sure he'll take care of them, maybe around the first of the year. That's not the point of the story, right? The point of the story isn't even necessarily the flood, if you really stop and think about it. The flood was an event that God used to do his will and to teach his truth. And Genesis 6 through 9 doesn't really tell us a whole lot of the details about the physics and the mechanics and the hydrology, right? But he tells us a huge amount about the spiritual truth that he wanted to drive into us. So let's take a look at those. Genesis 6. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took wives, any, took as their wives any they chose. Here we have a bunch of people, and we're not going to get into who the sons of God are or the children, the daughters of men. For the most part, what God's trying to teach in here doesn't matter. The point here is there is a physical and material aspect to our life that if we don't manage, we go take things that maybe don't belong to us. There is a desire that comes out of that physical material world that we live in now that tries to capture every conceivable thought of our heart and every conceivable minute of our time to draw us into that realm. And in one simple illustration, God drives that home. Because there's where the root is. There is a self-centeredness to all of us. And when we allow that to run even just a little bit rampant, we do all kinds of stupid and bad things. They saw and they took. The word took has a whole lot of connotations to it. One of them is to seize, which gives the idea that it wasn't necessarily a friendly takeover of the wives. It seemed to be a bit of a more volatile kind of taking. When we live in this kind of environment, it's crushing. That's why the world is going flat. There's an oppression, right? There's an oppression in the world today that squashes. As much as we think society, as much as everyone thinks society is moving in the right direction, this prevailing attitude, both in and out of the church, crushes. Crushes relationships, it crushes society, it crushes every part, every single part of our environment. When you're self-centered, when everything's focused inward, even just a little bit, we tend to do things that we are not happy with, and many times very, very ashamed of. And if it goes out of hand, as we have seen in just all the killings that have gone on this past year, it's all based on some form of self-centeredness, whether it's self-centered based on religion, self-centered based on ideas about a minority group or even a majority group. It's because I want something and I don't like what you're doing about it, so I'm going to go do something. And where does it bring us? It brings us to the next piece that God talks about, violence. We're living in a hostile, violent world. In my story, that was the last thing I would ever have expected, living where I live in the environment that we live in here today in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. To have somebody literally plot somebody's death because he didn't get the job. Genesis 6:5. Let me back up a little bit. Genesis 6:11. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Violence is one of those first steps to just outright corruption. They can certainly happen independent, but if you get to that place where you are violent, corruption is that very, very next breath from there. And it's not just physical violence. Not just physical violence. It can be anger, right? Something that is much closer to our home and where we live. And it's that far away. And God had to show me that. You're teaching this? I'm going to show you how close to that you are. Friday morning, Rita and I just finished devotions and prayer together, and something came up in the conversation, and plain and simple, my self-centeredness flared and hurt the one I loved the most because I was angry and violent in the tone of my voice. That far. I think that's true of all of us. Satan and events, they trigger the right or the wrong, I guess the wrong element. In our self-centeredness, we do things that hurt the ones we love. They hurt our walk. And they hurt our witness. It's in all of us, just in different forms. Corruption. You've gone to the place of violence. Sometimes you can get into corruption without necessarily the physical violence. What is our Congress mostly involved in these days? Making laws or investigating corruption? Pretty sad how much has gone on, and it seems to be growing by the year and by the decade, where there is so much out there that we can't seem to finish dealing with it because it just runs rampant. It just runs rampant. Corruption and violence, finances, right? Various financial crises we've had over the past 20 years. Self-centered greed, in a sense, violence against other people because you took from them what didn't belong to you and that they entrusted to you, and developed an entirely corrupt approach for your own gain. This is Noah's world. This is the people that he dealt with. This is our world. This is the people we deal with. Some of them are outside of the church and in society, and maybe some of them are in the church. But in any case, as much as it applies in Noah's day, it applies to today. And to every single one of us, myself included. As I very easily proved. Even in the midst of preparing for this, that is there. I was thinking about this. I had a whole different train of thought from my previous teaching on Noah. And it's here where God said, that's out, go this way. And when we look at the Noah story, we see this progression, downward progression of behavior, right? From the draw and the desire of the physical and the material, the flare-up of self-centeredness that can bring in any one of us, whether you're a Christian or not. It then leads to violence in many different forms and in corruption. That's behavior. Noah deals with behavior. And that's a key thing. And we're going to talk about that later when we actually take a look at Noah and what made him so different. But behavior is extremely important. But the flip side of the coin, or the other side, you can see the helix, right? That's a double helix, right? It's our DNA. And I put that up there for a very particular purpose because I think it illustrates the involvement of behavior, particularly bad behavior, but it can also be good behavior. But in this example, we're looking at, what not to do as opposed to what to do, but we can learn what to do. But they are joined. There is no way to separate what you do from what you believe. And you can start bad behavior just by doing it, and it will affect what you believe. And something can happen where you change what you believe, and it will go back and affect your behavior, and you can zigzag back and forth between these. And so, when I was looking at putting these together, I was brought back to a very famous, very pointed passage in Romans, chapter 1. We're certainly not going to do a complete exposition on this chapter because in and of itself it's huge. But in Noah, in his story, we see the issues of behaving badly. In Romans, we see the issues of thinking badly and believing badly. I'm not going to go through all the details. There's a progression in Romans chapter 1 that takes us down through the deterioration of belief. And it typically is progressive, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. We can jump in and out of that depending on what our needs are to justify something that we want to do that we know we shouldn't do. But the first three talks about suppressing the truth. And it talks about suppressing the truth. The first step in this decay is suppressing the truth about creation. That's fundamental to all the attacks on life, right to life, marriage, and on we can go. Second step is we lose that sense of honoring God as God. An interesting caveat. We don't give thanks. I've been thinking about that piece of it, and it's like, one of the best ways to know whether or not you're honoring God as God and or believing that he is truly the creator is to thank him. And if I'm not, maybe I'm losing that sense of honor for him that I should have. Third step is exchanging God's glory for images of man. All this dealt with a lot of idolatry and idol worship back in the ancient world. It's no different today. We still have our idols, but they're just different. They're just different. Where we have exchanged the worship of God to the worship of us. And even in some cases, the worship of society, or the worship of science, or the worship of sociology, or whatever thing it is that you want to raise up. And none of those things belong in that place. There's a phrase that from here on out tracks through these stages that God puts in there, and it's this phrase, God gave them up. Up until this point, if you wish to consider, God has a protection around the human race, a guard against going too far from who he is and what he has planned for us. You can hide the truth. You can dishonor me a little. You can dishonor me to a certain extent, and I'll overlook the fact that you don't thank me as you should. But don't you dare make yourselves God. Don't you dare make yourself, make something in this world God. Because at that point, this protection around society, this protection around us, whether we are Christians or not, starts to get shed. And we become more and more open to move away from God and to behave badly away from God than ever before. And it happens with, in between the next pairs. The rest of the trip. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie. This is where not only do you put other things in his place, but you actually begin to worship them in the way you live. It's that next step of moving out of worship for God and into worship of everything but God, where first we just replace the images or the model or the object. Here we actually change the worship and the behavior. And God gave up more. He moves people into a much more, the words from Romans are, God gave them up to a debased mind. That's the next one. God gave them up to just dishonorable passions, desiring things that should not be desired, and from that doing things that should not be done. Did not see fit to acknowledge God. That's where you're just not even bothering about God at all. And that's where it gets down to where he lets go and he says he gives them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. At that point, step 5, that protection is off. The world is exposed, the country is exposed, the society is exposed, and we as believers or unbelievers are exposed to the worst of us and them. God pulls all those restraints off. He pulls all those restraints off. Last one, and I think that some of the quotes that I read earlier from some of the atheistic philosophies going around today is haters of God. If we ever lived in a time where that was prevalent, it's today. And probably yesterday, and most certainly tomorrow. And that hate for God will go even farther than just hate for God, because it's eventually going to come to us. It's eventually going to come to us. Now, is everybody here all the way at the bottom of either of these stacks? Of course not. We'll all be dead. But where is society going? Where do we see our government going? Where do we see science going? Where do we see sociology going? Where do we see the medical industry going? It's in somewhere in this stack. Another example from this weekend. Wednesday night, we went out and ordered some sandwiches for dinner. So I'm the one that goes and gets the food. So it's the least I can do, since I don't really cook, so they can go buy stuff. So I went out. I got the sandwiches from one of the local pizza places. And on the way, as I always do, I stopped by the Humvees. I got a bag of chips. What in the world is the story doing here? It kind of just proves the point of suppressing the truth, right? I wanted chips to go with my sandwich. I like chips. Plain and simple. They're not healthy, but they're really good. Right? We all have some kind of food that we really like. I like too many foods, really a lot. So I brought it back, and I go, I'm telling Rita, I got the baked chips, right? They have less calories, they're healthier. Who am I kidding? What am I doing? I'm suppressing the truth, right? Right? To what? Enjoy the material because it was my self-centered desire to go eat chips that night. And that's a really trivial example. But as Christians, what are we doing over here in this stack that we know we shouldn't be doing? And so we go back and we suppress the truth. We take the things of God that we know are not right, or are right, but because we're doing what we're doing, we stuff them somewhere. Like the chips. I justify the chips, and I justify the behavior. But what's the end result? Unhealthy. Unhealthy spiritual life, unhealthy physical life. We're in a place in our society today where what we do here is really important, that we don't fall into this trap, in this progression, because it is a snowball. And if we don't catch ourselves, like when I was preparing for this, and I lost my temper with Rita that morning, if we don't catch it, we're just going to drift off and be nowhere near as what God has called us to be. Critical stuff to guard our hearts, guard our lives, guard our family, guard our society, and guard our country, and ultimately our world. So where has this taken our current society? This is abortions by year up through 2014. It's the most recent numbers. Everything peaked about, this is the U.S. The peak of the arrow was at 1.4 million babies. Thankfully, it has tapered off to where we're down, I mean, still not good. The only good number is 0. But we're down to about half as of 2014. Current numbers for 2018, it's back up, it's pushing 1 million again. Violence, corruption, that's where we are. This is all over the world. 50 to 60 million babies a year worldwide. Destroyed. Human trafficking, U.S. concentration. I think the estimates are, there's estimates all over the place. I couldn't find anything too terribly consistent. I'll give you a concentration map. I think they estimate it somewhere between, I've seen numbers anywhere from 25 to 45 million people involved in some kind of human trafficking, whether it be sex, labor, or whatever. Desire, self-centeredness, violence. This is nothing but violence and corruption. 150 billion a year in revenue. That behavior slope and that belief slope for us is critical. Will we go do this? Probably not, but if we're not careful, we'll start to slip. And it's not where God wants us. It's not where God wants us. Sometimes when things come up on the news, Rita and I will look at each other and say, save the whales, kill the babies. If people could see the unborn child in the same way they see and protect animals, we would have a whole different view of abortion. We would have a whole different view and push on human trafficking than we do today. Probably even as Christians. It doesn't hit us because we're not there. And that guy I talked to on Friday night was murdered over the weekend. That hit me. That was so real, so close, way too close for comfort. But all this is really close. It's closer than we think. What do we do? What did Noah do? What did it say about Noah? So after talking about the wickedness of man that's great on the earth, and every intention of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually, he looks down and he says, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. What are the things that Noah did that set him apart that can set us apart and keep us from those interactive paths of belief and behavior decay. Now, the first things that he talks about is that Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his ways. Does that mean he was perfect? Of course not. After the flood, what did he do? He got drunk. No, he wasn't perfect. Perfect also means complete. There was a completeness about him and his relationship with God that carried him through this time of violence, sensuality, and evil. The word righteous kind of fits quite nicely with our theme of doing rightly. And that's kind of what the word means. It's to do the right thing. It's behave the way God really intended us to behave. And it was part of not only his walk, but his of what he did, but what he believed. That was his character. Do two of these together. The two reinforcing parts of this character that he had is that he walked with God and he believed God. What did we just go through? Behavior and belief. Exactly what he did. He joined those two in a way that made him stand out among the people with whom he lived. The word walked with God, when I did some digging on the word itself, it was a very interesting word. Actually, the root word is very, very general. It means to move. But it's interpreted in different ways based on the context. But I love that thought. Noah moved with God. That sounds so much more intimate. It's like when your kids are little and they stand on your feet, and you walk around the house, or they grab your legs, right? So you almost can't walk, but you try, and you drag them along. That's how God wants us to. That's how he wants us to behave. He wants us to behave so that he and I move together. Every day, every minute. And he believed God. Go build me a boat in the middle of a desert. I'm going to send you more animals than you could count. You're going to have to figure out how much cat litter to buy to take care of the cats. And have a good day. What did he do? He built a boat. And it says, so very interestingly, which we'll get to in a minute, about how he believed and behaved on that belief. Exact obedience. Verse 22 in chapter 6. Noah did all this stuff. The animals, the boat. It says he did everything that God commanded him. Do I do that? Not even close. Not even close. You know what that obedience is? What's inside? That's us. That obedience is another form of God's protection, like we talked about from Romans, where he pulled it away. We don't have to understand it. In many cases, we don't even have to believe it. We just have to do it. And the protection that we get from our Heavenly Father covers us completely and allows those other things to grow. When we don't obey, there's a break, and things can come in that shouldn't. Last, worship. At the end of the flood, after he got out along with all the animals, it says in 8:20, Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Nor will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. Worship. That's why we're here today. But worship should be entrenched in our lives. It should touch our walk and the way we move with God. It should touch our belief in God. It should touch our character. And it should touch our obedience. And if worship is not there, if we go back to here, there's an empty spot in the middle of each of us as humans. And those legs get wobbly because they have no support. And they can break, and they can bend, and they can move us into those decisions and those beliefs that take us in the wrong direction. But when worship is central to who we are as people created in God's image, they reinforce every part of our lives. It doesn't work without it. Two illustrations, and we'll wrap up. There's a music group out called Amber Run. Another collaboration with my granddaughter Paige. She goes, oh, I was telling her about the talk today. It hadn't quite evolved to this yet. She goes, oh, there's this really good song out called Noah by this group called Amber Run. So I said, send it to me. So she goes, I don't think they're a Christian group, but the message seems pretty good. They're not totally theologically correct. However, there's a hugely good message in here that kind of reinforces some of the things that we talked about today. And so it's one example of how the world notices righteousness. Because this group, why they ever picked Noah I will never, ever know. But something in his story moved them to recognize who he was. And it goes, my name is Noah, and the sea is my home. Oh, and this small wooden boat will be my throne. I'm proud of what I've built and the things that I've done. Oh, and all the people I've learned to love. Second verse, and I'm not quite sure, wait. Another interesting combination. Another Bible character. My name is Judas, and my hands are tied. Oh, and even my presence is a warning sign that wherever you go and whatever you do, your past will always follow you. So where do we want to be? We want the past to follow us. Even in the little things, they follow us. Or do we want to look back in our life and not to necessarily be proud in a bad way, but look back and say, God, thank you for letting me be righteous and move with you. There's another Noah that's alive today in a different circle. His name is Dr. Francis Collins. Dr. Collins was the director of the Human Genome Project. Brilliant, brilliant scientist. Somewhere in his career, a number of years ago, became a Christian. He's got a book out called The Language of God that talks about his conversion and his involvement with the Genome Project. Fascinating book. He is a Noah of today because he lives in the circles of atheistic science that is constantly trying to drive people away from belief in God rather than towards him. And he's in the middle of that. And there is such a respect in the scientific community for him, even though he stands for so much that is against everything that they want to pursue and push. And so there are people, Noahs of today, and we can be that Noah too, where we are. There's a story that Ravi Zachariah gave about Francis Collins, who was giving a big scientific talk somewhere. You probably heard it if you listened to Ravi at any great length. Where he was in the midst of giving a talk on just the beauty and the grandeur of the human genome and the double helix, and he left a picture, a much better picture than I had of the human genome up on the screen. And you know what he did in that scientific presentation? He walked over to the corner where he had his guitar, and he sang a worship song at the end of his talk. That's pretty gutsy. But because he was Noah, he could not only get away with it, but make it extremely effective. Father, it's a lot of stuff today. A lot of stuff to think about, a lot of stuff to deal with as we go through life. A lot going on around us that is against us as Christians. And we pray today that you would give us some new sensitivities to how we think, how we believe, and how all that can affect us and help us to be on our guard. Make us a Noah. Amen.
seated for a moment. Thank you, Dawn, for bringing us through this Genesis as we continue our series. You've given us a lot to think about as we go forth this week. A few updates on things that are coming up in the near future and the not too distant future. The marriage retreat. We had the Frisians here last week. Paul spoke to us during the service and then followed up afterwards with a great session for those that were able to come. The annual marriage retreat is happening in Newport, February 8th to the 10th. And if you are interested, we encourage you to register for that. The registration for the early bird dates is ending tomorrow. So if that is on your docket, this would be a good day today or tomorrow to sort that out. You can see the one anothering for any other details or talk to Mary Klink about that. National Collection Week is starting up. So Katrina came up last week as well and gave us some updates on OCC. We are in need of volunteers to man the foyer here as collections come in from all over the region for Operation Christmas Child. We also are in need of folks to bring in things for the boxes that we're going to fill here at the chapel. So there's still more of the tags in the window in the foyer area. So if you want to pick those up, this would be a great Sunday to do that. And also the team is looking for volunteers. Katrina mentioned the packing center, the distribution center. So they're going to be traveling down to the distribution center to pack the boxes up and send them overseas. So if you are interested in that, Katrina would be a good person to talk to you about that. And then the last OCC thing, we are having a fellowship lunch next week. So that's coming up on the 18th. If you're interested in doing the packing party / fellowship lunch, they'll be happening following this service next Sunday. The chapel Christmas party has been scheduled. Save that date, December 1st. It's going to be in the afternoon, and we'll be talking more about that. We'll have more information on that. We'll be doing sign-ups. We'll be doing sign-ups for people that know that are available for that and know that it's coming up in the afternoon in the foyer today, and we'll have more information on the theme and how it's going to run in the next week or two. Deep Freeze is happening. So this is the event where they open up summer camp in the winter for our middle school and high school students. So if you have any interest in that, that's happening the weekend of the 11th, so January 11th. So Patty would be an excellent person to talk to about that. She'll need to know if you are interested, or probably your child or grandchild is interested in going. There's not a lot of middle schoolers in here at the moment, but middle school and high school students, let her know if they are interested in going to that. And our missionaries of the month this month are the Coonies. They are serving the Lord in Fiji at the Gospel School for the Deaf, where they have an ongoing long-term ministry that they've been involved in that predates them, and the chapel has been involved in that for many years. We've sent various folks to that ministry over the years, and it is an absolutely amazing ministry and an amazing need that they have in Fiji to work with their deaf student population, one that tends to be very marginalized in the developing world. They bring these students in from all of the islands, Fiji and beyond, islands outside of Fiji and other nations, and give them a home, a place to live. And they really spend a lot of time not just educating them and giving them the skills that they'll need to be to go back into the world when they're done with school, but also intense discipleship goes on there. It's an amazing program. So if we can be lifting up the Coonies as they continue to serve in this ministry, that would be great. And then just following the service, if you would like, if you are led to pray for any aspect of the OCC ministry, whether it's our involvement, whether it's the larger involvement, we'll be just having prayer. Katrina will be up here following the service. If you want to come up and pray, that would be excellent. So, unless I missed anything. With that, we'll dismiss you and go in peace. Have a great week.